Hello, my name is Jenni Cargill-Strong. I'm an Australian storyteller, and I've been telling stories for about 30 years. I've been teaching storytelling for about 20 years, and I've been teaching online for some years. I've lost count. And the purpose of this video is just a short introduction to storytelling. Hopefully, you'll get some little gems to take away with you on your storytelling journey. And maybe I'll entice you to come and do a course with me. You can watch recorded videos like this that go into more depth with storytelling. And you can also join story circles with me to learn the basics of storytelling in a storytelling community. But before I proceed, I want to take a little pause and a bit of a deep breath and light the story candle you can see behind me. I know that in this fast-paced world and videos, people will just stop and rush off and do something else. But if you can bear to slow down, I'm going to light this candle as a symbol of what going into the imagination and slowing down can do. All of the beautiful benefits of storytelling include suspending time of deep listening, and deep listening can't happen in a hurry. So let's just take that moment to slow down and light the story candle and connect to the numinous that resonates in the realm of story. And as I light that story candle, I hope that my passion for storytelling can ignite your passion for storytelling, and that we can share that light together, and that you may go onward and share your love for storytelling, and that will ignite it in other people. Because to me, I guess every artist believes that their art form is the most therapeutic and powerful and wonderful. But to me, the world needs more stories, more and more good stories to reconnect us to ourselves, to each other, and to this beautiful planet that we live upon. Now, I'll touch now on some of the benefits of storytelling. Why storytelling? Well, three really powerful components of storytelling, of oral storytelling, are relationality, responsiveness, and knowledge creation. And these are outlined in textbook, and I'll put the links below, for a unit that I teach at Southern Cross University, written by a colleague. And I think it enunciates very clearly some of the profound benefits of oral storytelling. Of course, a lot of people in the world call themselves storytellers and name things storytelling, and it is a very broadly used term. Singers call themselves storytellers, filmmakers call themselves storytellers, authors call themselves storytellers, and they all are in their different way, but oral storytelling is what I'm talking about here. Let's just unpack some of those three things: responsiveness, relationality, and knowledge creation. When I read a book to you, and I am reading to you the words that the author has written, and I am showing you the illustrations that the illustrator has created, I am just bringing to life somebody else's thoughts, somebody else's story as they have imagined it. But when I put the book down, when I've found a story that can actually be told as an oral story, and not all storybooks do translate to an oral story, then I can tell the story eye to eye, mind to mind, and heart to heart. Now, humans are hardwired to receive information encoded in a story. And when you give information encoded in a story, the retention rate jumps dramatically. There's lots of studies to show that, and I'll put the links below the video. So it's very intimate. For instance, in terms of relationality and responsiveness, a live story told orally, lives as a co-creation between the teller and the listener. No matter how good a storyteller I am completely vulnerable to my listeners. There is only so much I can make magic with if the audience is refusing to go with me. The more skills I have, the more that I can entice them and enchant them and bring them along with me. But there's a limit to that. If people really refuse to go there and they've got their arms crossed, or they're, someone's loudly reading a newspaper, there's a limit to what I can do. So it's a very, it elicits the audience to be co-creators, to be participants. And we live in a very passive world where entertainment is very passive. And next, in order to really understand a story that's being told orally, you have to do an awful lot of imaginal work. You really need to imagine the images as they are spoken. And this requires deep concentration. And it also builds relationality not only between the teller and the listener, but it also builds relationality in the community of listeners, because everyone is sitting, imagining the same story and the same scenes and feeling the same emotions if they're really caught up with the story and swept along with it. But each person is imagining that in their own unique way, in the way that suits their personality and their imagination. So in terms of responsiveness, as a storyteller, I can look out at the audience when I have the story in me, and I won't say memorized exactly, because that evokes the idea of memorizing something word for word, and that isn't the ideal way to tell a story. It's too easy to drop a stitch and the whole thing falls apart. It's better to learn the bones of the story and then roughly know the words, some of the words that you're going to say, and I'll teach that in future videos. But when I know the story really well and I'm looking out at the audience and they're looking at me, then I might change the wording slightly, but even if I don't change the actual words of how I'm telling the story, I might change the way that I deliver the story. So that's called the narratological discourse, the way that I impart the story. I might tell it very softly, or I might tell it in a very exciting, racy, dynamic way, or I might slow certain bits down when I can see that the audience isn't quite following me, or I might back up and I might explain something. Well, if you didn't catch such and such, or you've never encountered a thingamabob, then let me just tell you, you might sort of stop, pause the story, park it, explain something, and then move on. As long as you're in the heart of the story, the audience will follow you. And I would also say that it's much more important to be relational, to be responsive, than to be perfect and to have the most perfect skill. Even if you stumble, even if you trip over your words, say something wrong, miss out a bit and then have to go back and tell it again, as long as you stay in the heart of the story and you haven't damaged it so badly that the audience can't follow it, they will be with you. People want to hear the end of a good story. As long as you've started strongly enough to entice their interest, people will be with you. So it's good to let go of needing to be perfect. So there's the relationality that storytelling evokes, because you're eye to eye, mind to mind, heart to heart. And then there's the responsiveness, because, if there's suddenly a loud bang outside, you can actually weave that into the story. It's not just a one size fits all, which is what we're used to when we watch things on screen, as you are now. You're just getting a recording and something might be happening in the background in your life maybe there's a siren in the background. Well, if I could hear that siren, I would weave that into the story. I might weave it into some reference of what I was talking about. So it's responsive. So it's relational, it's responsive, and it's an important form of knowledge creation because, as I said, we are hardwired to receive information encoded in a story. Since humans could speak, we have explained the world to each other and to ourselves through story. So, relationality, responsiveness, knowledge creation is the perfect way to educate. There are some cultures where, in fact, in Iran, before the regime change, most of their education was told in stories, through stories, and it really stays with people. People that I've met who've gone through that system say they were really profoundly impacted by that. And there were moral stories about how to live a good life in that education, which also had enormous impact on the way that they chose to proceed in their lives. So stories have so many purposes. So the way that Story Foundations works is I've split it into these story videos. So videos like this one that go into more depth about various components of storytelling. And then story circles, which are participative. So they're live online Zoom circles. One day I might have live face-to-face ones as well. But initially just the video recordings, which you can watch whenever you like. And then each story circle follows on from one story video. So I also do a readout of, I get some feedback from you about exactly how much you want to be challenged. So some people are very nervous and they just want to take little baby steps and they don't have a lot of time or energy and they just want to do it gently. Other people really have ambitious goals and they want to be challenged and they want to go further. So in the first week, I spend a lot of time really developing a safe learning community and getting a sense of where each participant wants to go to, at what level they want to work. So the last thought, the last image that I would like to leave you with is the story of Indra's net. This story comes from the Mahayana Buddhist tradition, and it is a story that has a metaphor in it that I think is so vividly beautiful on so many levels. It's, to me, a story of the interconnectivity of all things. It's a story that illustrates the concept of interbeing, which Thich Nhat Hanh has talked about. The idea that we are all deeply connected on the great web of life, and that we need the humility to recognize that we are one being in a web of life, in a web of beings that all depend on each other. And it is only our hubris that can imagine that we can survive without the smallest microbe, without the smallest earthworm, without the largest creatures, all being healthy alongside us, living regeneratively. But it is also the beautiful idea of the interconnectivity of all thoughts, all ideas, and all stories. And when you tell a story with this understanding, with this awareness of this divine interconnectivity, this brings a different way of telling to your telling. Your humble story, your humble retelling of this story resonates in a larger field. And it is the way that you tell the story, the awareness with which, the vibration of which, that is more important than, to a degree, the nuts and bolts. You still need to be able to be heard. You need enough volume to be heard. You need to be articulate enough that people can understand what you're saying. You need to tell a reasonably good story. But more important than being completely polished and perfect and technically correct is the energy with which you tell the story. Have you really listened to the story? Have you really listened to yourself? Have you really listened to the audience that you're going to tell the story to? These are the most important things to me of telling a story soulfully. So I invite you to close your eyes if you would like to and listen to this story. In ancient times, Indra was the king of all the gods. And one day he decided to make an exquisite net, so vast that it stretched across the entire sky. And with the extravagance of a god, at each intersection of every thread, each node, he placed a beautiful, polished jewel. And every jewel reflected every other jewel, like a set of mirrors that reflect an image in an unending way. No one jewel was more important than any other, and every jewel affected the entire net. When the wind blew, when a bird flew past, when a song rose up from the earth into the net shimmered and shivered and ululated in response. Everything that exists or has ever existed, every being, every molecule, every idea that has ever been thought or will be thought is a jewel in Indra's net. Listen, feel, watch, sense? Where do you perceive Indra's net? I wish you well on your storytelling journey. And I hope those little stories and anecdotes help you along your way. And I hope I get to meet you at a story circle or at some kind of a story event, somehow, some way, somewhere. All the best.